My name is Ashley, and this is Let's Talk Dispatch.
I do. You're gonna do it. Do it really well.
And I believe the world needs more dispatchers.
Around in the mud, blood, and beer.
Years that I'm not working 4th of July. 4th of July.
Saying community policing, right? What about community dispatch?
So on this show, with the help of my guests, we will educate, empower, and support the heroes behind the headset.
Right.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode here on Let's Talk Dispatch with me, Ashley, the Raspy Dispatcher. A couple weeks ago, I put on my Instagram story asking folks for questions that they're hoping to get answered about all these things that affect dispatchers, from burnout to, understaffed. And I got a bunch of amazing questions from you guys that I am going to ask my guest today, who is Jim Marshall, a familiar voice in the 911 industry. He is the co-founder of 911 Training Institute, and he's certainly a leading voice, like I said, in this industry for mental health and wellness for dispatchers. So I'm going to bring him on, and we're going to tackle some of these questions and learn more about Jim's career and history and how he got involved in this line of work. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Ashley. It's good to see you.
Nice to see you again.
It's been so long, like about
I know, right?
Just before you kicked me out, right?
Well, thank you so much for being willing to jump on. I know we talked and it was Ryan Dedman. He is my hookup for folks, and he connected us to make this happen. And I'm just super thankful for you being excited and willing to join me today.
I'm not going to miss an opportunity when it's possible, Ashley, because what you're doing with Raspy Dispatcher is. And by the way, do you sing rock and roll by any chance?
I'm a big fan of Stevie Nicks.
Oh, there you go. Like I said, well, why did they call it the Raspy Dispatcher? Well, hey, you could be Stevie Nicks. Anyhow, no. Anytime I have an opportunity to jump in and think creatively, and bring encouragement that's substantive, that's really solid to the 911 family, I want to do it. And your podcast here is a really great opportunity for everyone. So, hats off to you. Although you have the hat, I don't. So hats off to you.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
And for the folks who, maybe this is their first time hearing who Jim Marshall is, maybe kind of your background, how you got involved with helping folks in this line of work and the 911 Training Institute and all that good stuff. Well,
I want to make this brief for those who already know, oh no, Marshall's doing his thing about his sister again. It's why does he have to always talk about his sister, Debbie, the dispatcher? Well, because we got to give credit where credit is due. And, if you think about dispatchers, we tend to typify dispatchers as type A, really, really intense, people who like to be in control, take charge, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I get it. But the reality is not every dispatcher is the same personality. Well, my sister, however, I will say, not controlling necessarily, but influential, and knew how to get her across. And we started hanging out, my whole life, my sister and I, we hung out. But I did my first sit-along in 1985 and a half. And it was in a little, it wasn't really a comm center. It was it's Waterford Township Police Department, a suburb of Detroit. And it was a dark little room. You entered from a dark hallway, and I came in there. She was doing graveyard shift. I was in my master's program in clinical psych at the time, and she was excited to learn what I was learning in grad school. And I was excited to see what my sister did, because there was no 3-digit number yet. And so I sat with her, and I'm not going to go into the whole thing. Suffice to say, my sister took a hot DV call, and it blew me away. Here I was learning this stuff in graduate school, how to diagnose, what's psychopathology, the disorders, how to do assessment, treatment, and all of that. And meanwhile, my sister, her adult life had started young, and she hit the trenches of 911. And here she was handling a hot DV call, and it blew me away what she had to leverage in terms of her intelligence and her emotional strength, her resilience to be able to handle that call. And I was hooked. 911 is like a lobster trap, or Hotel California, right? You can come anytime you want, but good luck trying to leave. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Just look at you, right?
Yeah. So, I got a podcast.
Yeah, you're in, man. You're way in, in bubbles. So the point is that when I finished my clinical training, and I was thrown into the deep end of a pool, and I was doing diagnostics on an inpatient unit, I started discovering PTSD And that's a whole other thing in terms of what does it take to help someone feel safe with you, right? And they ended up feeling safer with me as I matured and started talking about things they'd never said before. All that is to say, Ashley, that I ended up being now I don't want to use inappropriate language with tender ears of 911 dispatchers. So
Yeah, we never curse. So
yeah, I didn't think so. But I will say I was a shit magnet. I was a clinical shit magnet. And 911 is like, oh man, I didn't realize there was a thing like that among clinicians.
Yeah.
So I ended up being pulled after 17 years of my career into the 911 family by my sister, who had started an academy in Michigan. She said, "You're going to train my people." And I said, "No, I'm not. I mean, I don't sit 911. That's disrespectful." She said, I'll tell you what's disrespectful. Your sister asked for help and you say no. You're going to train my people or I'm going to break your arm. So anyhow, she denies that she threatened bodily harm. But when I came into 911, it was bringing my trauma background and relationship background. That's all. What I did in the trenches for like forever was in trauma therapy and relationship therapy and stuff in between. And when I came into the 911 family to built out a resilience course, the first one, which is still our flagship course, evolved over time, Survive and Thrive Together 911 Center, I was blown away by the response, Ashley, because dispatchers were so ready to not only talk about the problem, but to be able to get concrete expert help dealing with the work, the call. And so I've never left. I've just gotten deeper and deeper in. I've transitioned from 100% clinical in 2013 to I had been training since 2005 in 911, but it's been all in 100% since 2013. Yeah, so there you are. That's it. There's more, but that's plenty.
That is awesome. And I mean, I think the more I talk to folks is that they kind of get into dispatch helping in two different ways, right? They fall into it and they're like, I don't know what to expect. I just kind of stumbled into this line of work, this career, this population. Or there's someone who's in it who baits them into it. And I think that person was definitely your sister who's like, no. I know you're doing your thing over there, but we need that service over here.
Yeah, you're right. And I had no idea how right she was. We've worked really hard. Lots and lots of people have worked really, really hard. You can see at state conferences and national conferences over the last 15 plus years, how the topics are coming up more and more frequently. We have more now in pros who are getting advanced degrees to come back and serve their people. And I want to reach out to those, by the way, any now in pros who are pursuing license as a mental health professional. We need you in this field. So yeah, there's no front door to 911. I mean, there should be, and there is, where we're really promoting it in the schools and teaching about it to the public. But there's, and by the way, I would like to say this, raspy dispatcher. I'm going to try to avoid saying much that I've ever said before on your podcast, because I don't want people, it's Marshall. If they've seen me before, we know what he talks about. No. Let's see what we can do to bring really fresh thinking. And those things that bear repeating, certainly I'm happy to share as well.
Definitely. Totally down for that. And, one thing that, as someone who's relatively new into this field and making these connections. And I mean, one of the main focuses of, my platform currently is really focusing on the aspiring dispatcher and those who are trying to get into this career and to be set up for success and longevity, in this career. And, I do dabble with, of course, building community for current and life after dispatch. And that's also a focus that I'm excited about as well. But I would say at this point, it's definitely for those aspiring folks and really setting them up for success, especially I would say during those first 18 months, which is typically that probationary period in this world. To deal with the tough calls, to deal with the tough challenges that you face during training, and to get through it so you can get to the fun meat of this career. Right.
Well, while you have just set the table, I literally am just building out a full day class on this topic, which I'm focusing on in terms of, getting 911 psych savvy. So that's a curriculum of ours that we haven't released yet, but getting 911 psych savvy. Why? This brings directly us to the point of how do we, first of all, you chose this profession, you accepted the job. Okay, now what? And how do we have to prepare people so they can not only last, but be able to survive and thrive, right? That is a big, big challenge. And I'm going to say something that's going to sound, can I be provocative and sound a little bit radical?
We want clicks, so please matter.
Well, you're going to get them, and I may get some blowback. And that leaders, if you're a leader in 911 and you're bothered by what I'm going to say next, I'm going to urge you to email me, jim@911training.net or info@911training.net. Seriously. And you want to have a conversation.
Jim wants all the smoke, everybody. He is ready for it.
Lay it on me. Lay it on me, because here's the deal. Most people who come into this field don't necessarily know what kind of a beast they have by the tail. They can't really know ahead of time what this experience, what this profession in 911 is going to be like psychologically, and therefore psychophysiologically. What do I mean by that? Everything in coming through the headset and with your dispatch, all the ugly, all the ridiculous, all the annoying, all the tragic, all the sad, all the enraging, all of that comes to the dispatcher without any warning, right? Field responders get a warning because our first responders tell them, our very first responders tell them what they're going to face on field, right? In the field, but our 911 pros don't. It's not until they have the headset on and experience some of these calls and start to realize they got a lion by the tail, a tiger by the tail. So having said all of that, I don't want to, here's my provocative statement. If you're new and you're willing to invest in your resilience and learn really excellent self-care, as opposed to, well, I'm young, I can handle anything. I can drag my body wherever I want. I can drag my brain wherever I want. And I'll be fine because I'm young. Yeah, no, you are until you're not. If you're going to do a regular day job, rock and roll. Just do kind of mediocre self-care like everybody else. And I sound really intense right now, Ashley, not because I'm angry, but because I've spent too many years in one-on-ones and bridging people to professional care where they hit the wall with PTSD, with compassion fatigue, of which burnout is only a part, where they were not equipped for this work. I've had so many veterans come to me privately and say, I wish I'd had the training you guys offer 20 years ago. Okay, so what I'm saying is, all right, guess what? For you as a newbie, you're in only 18 months. You don't have to wait 20 years to get burned out. Let's back up on this. I'll say it to you this way. And I'm speaking to all of you out there, who are listening to this, watching this. If you're not dedicated to your own self-care, run like hell from this profession right now. Now, pause. We don't need to lose even one more dispatcher. You said, what? The world needs more dispatchers.
It's true.
Oh my gosh, is that true, right? It absolutely is. But how do we keep them?
Exactly.
I mean, why would you run from dispatch? Why would somebody say, well, I am going to be mediocre in my self-care? I mean, if our standards are that poor for ourselves, we're in trouble anyhow, whether we do this job or not. I'm just going to say, you got to live it like you mean it in terms of self-care. The idea of I want to help people and I'm going to save everyone else. I'm not mocking that, but I'm saying that has to be based on the foundation of self-care right here.
Yeah, if we're not taking care of ourselves, we can't take care of others, or we can't take care of others for long periods of time. Right? There's a certain point where we hit a wall. And one aspect of that I call it training and trauma is like these OG dispatchers who have these trainees, these entry-level folks who, like you said, don't know the beast that they got by the tail. And they're just training them in trauma. Like 911 call back to back, no breath in between. This is how I learned to do it. So this is how you should learn to do it.
Right.
I think that the technology, the staffing, the environments that we are now dispatching in compared to 20 years ago are creating environments where we don't have to learn to dispatch traumatically. I shouldn't have to work, multiple high priorities at once because we have the technology and the staffing, et cetera, to prevent those having to train dispatchers in that manner.
Well, so let me see if I follow what you're saying.
Okay.
Are you saying the way to prepare people to handle the hardship of the job is not to say, just wait, here's another bad call. Oh, here's another bad call. How you doing now? Kind of like, toughen up or get out.
Yeah, kind of like that. I walked in the snow barefoot, no jacket, uphill when I learned to dispatch. So you should as well.
Yeah.
And I think that does still happen.
Yeah.
And I think our entry levels and folks who the workforce in general
Yeah.
are not in a headspace where they're going to take that. They're just going to leave, which I don't blame them. And I just think we need to find ways, because I think it comes back to self-care too, right?
Yeah.
If the folks who are training our entry levels didn't have access to self-care training or,
Resilience training, right? Peer support.
that knowledge,
Yeah.
they're not going to know how to pass it on in their training or
Right.
advise these entry-level folks. And I definitely think we need to create environments with our trainers in our entry levels where we're facilitating those conversations and allowing those spaces during our training where we're not made to feel bad about feeling bad about a call we had.
So absolutely. Now here's the thing though. If you're listening right now and you're a veteran dispatcher, then you probably have had the conversation in which it goes kind of like this. And I think our newer dispatchers who are younger will react to this as well. New people are too sensitive. Like they feel everything. They think that, they should be able to have their hands held while we do it. And we got to handle them with kid gloves. And we got to walk on eggshells and they're so easily offended. Okay. Timeout. Stop right now. Can you relate, Ashley? Have you heard stuff like that?
Sure.
Okay. Right. So let me make a promise and a statement about, and this is the way we roll in our whole faculty at the Noun Training Institute. Same thing, right? There's no cookie cutter solutions. Okay. And seldom is the truth found in the extremes. So I'm not saying that's right or that's wrong. It's complicated. But if we back up on this, part of the equipping has to be to train people to be resilient human beings. And we got to get savvy. If our military needs it, our 911 pros absolutely need it. So most people are getting some kind of stress management training. We need to be sure that that is based on empirical evidence, that the stuff we're teaching and the science we're teaching them is actually going to empower them. Having said that, there is a reality that old school was just to suck it all up. And now we know that didn't work. Now, here's the thing though. Sucking it up is about having only one way of dealing with psychological pain and distress. I'm good. I'm fine. You fine. I'm good. I got it. I'm fine. And so, but it just keeps internalizing. So now, there's a little more impairment with sleep, a little bit more Jack Daniels or another extra glass of wine or a few more beers, or we just keep stuffing it. We know that doesn't work anymore. Having said that, the extreme is also not to feel everything all the time about all kinds of stuff, right? Well, so what that means is we do need to be able to teach our people about self-care is also reaching out and getting good care that's available. Solid EAPs, good peer support, good evidence-based therapy from clinicians in the local area that get 911, right? And that is easier said than done. However, we also have to train people in mental toughness. And this is the part where our savvy, if 911 pros are psych savvy as newbies, and certainly our veterans are right to the extent that they will say, we were going to have thicker skin. We're going to have some alligator hide to be able to handle this job. And that doesn't mean sucking it up and stuffing everything, but it does mean we've got to redefine what's normal, incoming, and how we relate to it. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
No, it makes complete sense. And I think that I'm one thing I do say with my initial department and my initial training is that I'm very thankful for the structure they had and the access that they created towards this conversation of peer support.
Excellent.
And let's acknowledge this now that this could be a problem for you. And it doesn't have to be a problem 10 years. It could be the first call you take when you hit the floor in the live session is like a terrible call. It's one of those, like, in this training, this realm, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And
that's right.
You don't have to wait for your bucket to overflow to acknowledge that it's getting full, right? And that's kind of the things that I talk about when I talk about self-care is like, you want to always provide yourself self-care. So when that big call does hit, it doesn't overflow. It just tops off and you're like, okay, I can work on getting this back down. And that's definitely conversations that I'm trying to facilitate with folks like you when we're talking about, especially entry levels, is like, Self-care starts day one of your career.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Right.
day one.
Well, and what that leads to is what the heck do we really mean by self-care anyhow? Because what we are at risk of is saying, not that you're saying this, but hey, you got to really do a good job taking care of yourself. Well, like, how do you really do that? What does that mean concretely? By the way, a shout out. Was it Cassie Sexton?
Yep,
Right?
Cassie. Yep.
Yeah, she presented at the Missouri 911 conference, the Missouri 911 coordinators conference. This was just last week, Friday. That was live streaming. She did a great job, and she made a presentation on burnout for 911. And I would encourage you to check that out. I think, Ashley, you're going to try to provide the link to that for people.
Yes.
Right? Excellent. Because she provides some really good concrete help in how to do that. Having said that, there's also this. I just will really emphasize, ask your center, and this is whether we're the ones training it at now in TI. This is not a pitch for us. I mean, we'd love it if we could serve you with training, but that's not the point. It's not an infomercial. It's a principle that's critical. 911 pros have to be resourced at a level that meets or exceeds the demand that's placed on them. Whenever you are resourced at a level that does not meet or exceed the demand placed on you, there's going to be wear and tear over time. And that's going to play out in multiple ways. So one of the elements that's essential is we've got to have resilience training for all new people that is not cookie cutter, that is not quick, pop stuff from the internet. I'm not trying to be critical of anybody's training. I don't have anybody in mind. I'm simply saying training has to be based on evidence that shows that the skills that are taught, the mindset that we're trying to get people to embrace has been established and is legit and will empower dispatchers. It's got to be customized for 911 from the ground up, not cookie cutter. So I would encourage everybody who's listening you need to ask their training coordinators, their leaders, if they haven't gotten resilience training, at least 8 hours of resilience training, are we going to get it? When are we going to get it? Because we can't put the burden only, Ashley, here's my point. We can't put the burden only on the frontliner to say, take care of yourself now. It's like, remember the oxygen mask. Like, okay, I get all that. But we need to equip them and empower them with a lot more information to be psych savvy enough to do that well.
And I do think it's a good point when we talk about the cookie cutter method, because I do remember being a little frustrated earlier in my training because I had to watch these videos for California Post videos, and a lot of them were geared towards officers.
Yep.
And I was like, why am I like, this is a waste of my time. Yeah. Like, this doesn't feel good. I know this wasn't made for me. Yeah. I'm only taking away maybe one thing out of this hour-and-a-half video because it wasn't made for me. It wasn't made for the world that I'm dispatching in. It was made for an officer, and they're showing it to me to check off a box. And I definitely think that comm centers, departments, need to look for those dispatch specific training, because you're going to get farther with folks with these trainings,
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right. And it doesn't have to be delivered by a mental health professional to be outstanding. It does need to be designed in collaboration with mental health professionals, and it has to be supported. The training has to be supported by research in some way, the elements of that training. So, in 2022, heading towards 2023, my gosh, it's almost Thanksgiving 2023.
Yeah. It's wild.
I know it. We've got to be able to do our best with this. And that's part of the issue. That's part of the solution to the retention problem is the more people feel equipped, and take those people in the first 18 months. What is their mental process? What secretly, privately are they going through that they don't want to admit to their CTO? They don't want to admit to veteran people unless there's a really trusting, safe relationship with those people about the struggle they're having. And how does that struggle accumulate over those 18 months in terms of anxiety, feeling truly prepared, and not just technically prepared for call mastery with difficult call types? So that's another piece of this. But what about in terms of how this is playing out? What do they do with this stuff? How do they prepare themselves for it? To the extent that we're giving them the equipment right away to be able to implement this through good resilience training, the more confident they're going to feel, the less afraid they're going to be, and the more they are going to be protecting themselves psychophysiologically from the impacts of this stress, the psychophys, the stuff that's incoming that plays out first in your head and then in your body.
Definitely. And I think one thing, I'm just going to hype up my previous department, that they did well
Yeah.
for entry levels is they established a mentor program.
Great.
So you had your trainer, and and dispatch is such a unique, and maybe first responders in general, because we all have to deal with like a field training officer or a communications training officer environment for a long period of time. And you are constantly receiving feedback because they only have X amount of time to, load you up with the policy and the tools and this and this and that. So that relationship between trainee and trainer can sometimes become very overloaded, right? It's like, I like you, but you're always telling me that there's always a little.
It's never good enough.
Yeah, like it's never good enough. And what my department did is they created a mentor program where I had my trainee, my trainer, and I had a mentor. And so when my trainer annoyed me, I could go to my mentor, and it was, a safe relationship where they're not going to go run and tell anybody my frustrations.
It's really good.
And I'm not necessarily going to tell my trainer because they're responsible for training me.
Right.
Versus I need someone to have an outlet to. Right.
Yes. And in part of that, I think the part of the role of the 911 mentor that is for new people is this: to help you reinterpret the intense kind of feedback you're getting from your CTOs. Because in real time, I mean, I've had conversations with people, and we've had some really full class size, down and dirty conversations about the reality of how it feels to be criticized, to be, in some ways it feels attacked. It feels like you're being diminished, demeaned, belittled, etc. And sometimes that is happening. And the burden is shared by both the CTO and the trainee. Both share responsibility for how treatment occurs, how feedback is given, and all of that. So it's not all on the newbie to reinterpret crap. I don't mean to reinterpret crappy behavior from anybody. Having said that, though, when you're a CTO and this is your third person you've trained in a row, and you are tired because of everything else, and maybe you're doing that mandatory overtime like everyone else, it's very possible that the trainer is going to say, "What the hell's wrong with you? Like, you know better than that. Like, come on in." And jump on about something they did wrong. I think part of the role of the mentor is to be able to buffer that. It's not making an excuse, but to be able to say, you know what, if this is an emergency response outfit, they're tired. If they attack your character in some very obvious, intense, awful way, then that has to be addressed. And if they attack your character at all, then that's got to be addressed. But we have to be careful that we're not interpreting every piece of rough-edged input from a trainer as a character attack or harassment, or if you follow?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, because this is part of the mental toughness. And I think a mentor, because if you're the mentor and I'm the newbie, I'm going to feel like I can trust you. And if I come to you, newbies have hurt feelings a lot. They may, depending on who they are, personality, to be able to come to you and say, I'm going to admit they said this and it really, really hurt. Okay. I'm glad you're telling me this. Teach me the context, what happened, what was going on. Okay, let's see if we can look at both sides of this, right? And here's what I'm going to offer you as somebody who's more veteran, so that they can kind of reinterpret and take a breath. And how powerful is that, as opposed to going to their other new peers and complaining and characterizing the trainer, the CTO, as this or that shouldn't be trusted, and is just, we've got schisms happening in a lot of comm centers right now between new people and veterans, because we need that chance to back up, slow down, reinterpret.
Yeah. And I mean, even for me, like, I recently lateraled to another agency, which I had to go through the training process all over again. And there's a little bit of imposter syndrome that comes out. I'm just like, I swear I could do this job at my last agency, but you're in that state of being constantly critiqued again and constantly adapted and changing to a different agency's way of doing things and different people's styles and policies. And I mean, it's just something that's natural to feel. That constant critique.
So, okay, now I'm going to do a little role switch on you. Ask Ricardo Martinez. I did that to him early on before his podcast was a big deal. And I'm going to do this thing on you. So years ago, I was a radio host for a few years. And it was called Straight from the Heart. And it was myself and a pastor. We talk about it as a shrink and a pastor. How do we deal with life and what kind of stuff we experience? So I'm going to turn the tables. I'm going to ask Ashley. Now, you all should know that Ashley was a scholarship college basketball. She was a basketball player. She was an athlete. Here's my question for you, Ashley. Okay. Because I mean, you're putting me on the spot. What?
Please, I'm here.
Turn around is fair play. Okay. You played what? Guard?
Point guard, yeah.
Point guard. Oh, you were point guard. That's right. Okay. And there's a lot of responsibility for point guard, isn't there? I mean, you get the whole thing going. Okay. So here's my question for you. Good coach. Good coach. What's the difference between a good coach and a coach needing improvement? I don't want to say bad coach, but let's say good coach, bad coach. They can both be tough. How does a good coach do tough that's different than the way a bad coach does tough in your experience?
I would say a good coach gives me the support to lead my team while also giving me the guidance to lead them. So they allow room for me to excel and to fail safely. I would say that's the difference between a good coach and a coach that could use some improvement. Is a coach that could use some improvement is going to be more restrictive with my way of leading my folks.
What does that mean? What do you mean by that?
Like they're going to want it done more their way. And when I do it a way that isn't necessarily correct in their eyes, they're not willing to hear my point of view.
That's the bad coach?
That is the bad coach.
Got you. Okay. Okay.
They want it done their way or the highway. And when I do it a different way, they're not willing to have a conversation as to why I did it this way versus that way.
Okay. Okay. So let me just follow this. The good coach, because this is coming back. What I'm trying to do is support your discussion about how to support our newer people. And I think this is important for our veterans as well as our new people, because we're all in it together to help us support the newcomers to 911. So the good coach is going to allow for flexibility as they listen to the way you handled something before they condemn it or say, no, that's not right, and I won't consider. They want to hear where you're coming from. So they're going to correct or guide or support your process, your decisions based on hearing you out. That's one thing.
Exactly. I think they're going to see me as someone they can learn from as well, rather than me only being able to learn from them.
That's a collaborative model. That's a collegial model. Okay, now here's another question. I know that coaches get away with a lot more screaming than somebody at comm center. We can't have people screaming in anger across the comm center too much because it's really distracting everybody else.
It really is. It is a recorded line in the background. We don't need that.
Well, but so what's the difference? Let's say without volume being the issue in terms of how a good coach confronts. I mean, do you remember making any colossal mistakes on the floor? Like you remember like blowing it and it cost your team some points or it contributed to a loss of a game?
Oh, I'm sure I can. Okay. I'm not perfect to say the least. That's
so how did you get confronted in a way that was it was like, oh, they're right, but it didn't damage you. It made you better.
I think the coaches that had the most impact in those situations where you're already down on yourself, right?
Yeah. When
you make the mistake, get the turnover, the bad pass, whatever, you already know, right? As an athlete, if we just talk about an athlete sense, you already know you messed up and you already know what happened after your mess up and, the cause and effect of that. And I think for me, the coaches that were able to put it back on me to explain to them, like, what were you thinking? What happened? Tell me what was going through your mind. Because when you make the decision in the moment, if we just talk about basketball, the intention is always good. Yeah. I thought this was going to happen. When I did this and that was going to make us successful. That's why I did it. Right? No one's out there like, I'm sure there are some people out there, but not me trying to blow the game.
Right. So this is a perfect parallel to 911 so far. Keep going.
Yeah. So no one's out there trying to intentionally do harm to the team. So the coaches that were able to go, even if it ends up getting me yanked, most of the time, and I did a lot of coaching too, your assistant coach is the one who goes to the end of the bench with the dummy who just made the mistake. Yeah. It's like, hey, what happened? And they talk through it. And so the coaches that pulled me over to the side was able to help me work through why I made my choice and
Okay.
how it affected things.
Yes.
And if I was to do it again, what would I do that time? I was able to kind of rationally do that role play out in my head. And next time I'm not going to make that mistake, or I won't be so prone to making that mistake, right?
So they're leading you through, they're helping you with a thought process that becomes internalized over time in terms of, okay, what just happened? What was I thinking? What was the outcome? How could I modify that? So that's collaborative. It's also helping you take responsibility for the need to change, as opposed to just being insulted or criticized in a way that has no substance. I think that is tremendous, because if we now take that to the mentoring role with 911, it's like, okay, look, a CTO in real time may not have any time on a certain shift to be able to do a whole lot of that assistant coach thing. However, we would hope that that they have the insight as a CTO, when they can catch a break, to come over and make it constructive. Hey, listen, I know it came across heavy with you. And if it was over the line, apologize. If it wasn't over the line, it was just intense, don't apologize. Say, look, I know I came across heavy with you. Here's where I'm coming from. Let's back up. I'm sure you were trying to do your best. Tell me what your thinking was. Okay, that led to this. So then you made that mistake. Okay, fair enough. What about the options? What could your options have been? Well, I could have, I used that determinant code, or whatever it is, right? I could have coded it this way. Okay, good. So now it's collegial, it's collaborative, and that new person is gonna grow more professionally. They're gonna take responsibility, as opposed to being kind of left alone with a sense of failure.
Yeah. It goes a long way, because like you said, the reality is sometimes if you're dealing with the 911 call and your trainee is fumbling it, sometimes we don't have time. It's an in progress.
That's right.
It's in progress. We have to deal with the in progress thing before we can debrief, right?
Yeah.
And acknowledging that before we even jump on calls, I think is helpful. Is like, sometimes I'm not going to be able to,
Yes, that's right.
and for lack of a better word, hold your hand, because we're dealing with an in progress emergency. That's the reality of the job. But understanding that and creating reasonable space for those debriefs that is reflective of the environment that our comm centers are in for our staffing and things.
Yeah, the reality of
the reality of it is that we do need to have moments for those debriefs, especially early on in training.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, and maybe a lot of our CTOs are already doing this, but to be able to say to somebody up front, listen, here's the way it's going to roll. As I start as your CTO, in real time, it may seem like I'm hot and all over your case, just jumping all over you. Please, I'm going to do my best that I'm not breaking any rules of respect, but I may be intense. I may be upset with you. Don't let it go deep all the way in. It's a moment where we're trying to get the job done. And then I'm going to come back to you the best I can later on, and we'll deal with it. We'll take care of it. But I think an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yeah.
Right. In terms of tell people how it's going to roll up front, set the stage, because then they have a framework for understanding and interpreting what seems to be attack or just, baseless criticism or harsh criticism.
And I think this is a good segue for one of the questions that one of the followers asked. And I think it is something that we do deal with a lot of times in our comm centers, is how do we handle the stress when working with a negative coworker, whether it's just a negative trainer, or just someone who's just like in the dumps. Maybe they're burnt out. Maybe they got some things going on at home.
Yeah.
How do we handle that stress in our comm centers?
Yeah. So it's a great question. And it's a question, Ashley, that we've taken over a half an hour with to unpack it really carefully so that the answer isn't cookie cutter, right? Because here's the thing. Every conflict with a coworker is unique to the two individuals, their personalities, the circumstance that took place. And so what I avoid like a plague as a clinician, I wasn't working with people who had simple problems. They didn't come to me for simple problems. They came to me when their lives felt really messed up, right? And bright people still couldn't find solutions. Why? They were too close to it. And there are also principles and practices of relating to humans that are not obvious to us all. And they're very hard to do in real time. Okay, so that's all my big caveat stuff, right? Okay. Okay, now I can't be sued. No, that's not why I was thinking about it. That had nothing to do.
Disclaimer.
No, I just don't want people to implement what they see as cookie cutter stuff that doesn't work and then be disappointed, like the problem can't be solved. It's not okay. So let's start with a couple principles. there's a difficult coworker. And if let's create this scenario. Let's create like a more specific scenario, Ashley, where somebody's experienced conflict with a coworker. What would be, without blowing anybody's cover or calling out people who are going to know who you're talking about or anything, what would be kind of a classic conflict with a coworker in a comm center?
I would say I think a classic conflict is that you have a coworker who maybe thinks they can do the job better, or they're like backseat dispatching.
Oh, jumping in on your calls and crap.
Yeah, jumping in on your calls, double checking your work, things of that nature. I think that happens a lot.
I'm glad you picked that one, because that is definitely a hot one that we talk about a lot in our classes. Okay, so here's the first thing. Most people don't like confrontation. So when we'll talk about some do's and some don'ts. So when we're upset with somebody, we typically struggle between a few different kinds of responses. For some, we have an aggressive reaction. So we fire back. And now what we've done is we've made it worse, and now we're part of the problem. And then this thing spins out of control. Other people get involved, gossip. And now we're entrenched in their sides and all that stuff. The other extreme, so notice aggression is an extreme. I said seldom is the solution or the truth in the extremes, right?
Sure.
Okay. The other extreme is we're passive. Most people are very afraid of confrontation. Even when they appear to be aggressive, some of the aggression comes out of the fear of losing control, the fear of it going badly. So we're like pouncing because that feels stronger to pounce than it does to be vulnerable. So most of us are inclined to be more passive. So, and what does that mean? In the face of a conflict, we don't deal with it while it's still fresh. We wait and we carry it inside of us because we don't want the fallout. We're a little bit emotion phobic, Ashley. Does that make sense? Like, we anticipate that it's going to turn to crap if we address the problem with the person. So because we anticipate it, we get anxious. We want to avoid feeling anxious, so we avoid dealing with the problem. It's understandable. This is not me finger pointing. It makes sense. None of us wants to feel distress, and conflict with other people is distressing. Okay. Then there's passive aggressive, right? And that is, you won't see the knife. You won't even know I have it in my hand, because you'll be right in the middle of a task and you feel it from behind coming through your rib cage, all the way, right? Piercing through the other side. Okay. So what am I getting at? We can get even, we can protest indirectly in a lot of different ways. Where it's not overt, where you can see that I'm like aggression. It's I'm getting even in ways. So in other words, I might talk about you. I might slam you. I might recruit somebody to take my side. I'll triangulate. I'll get somebody who agrees that I'm your victim. That means you're the perpetrator. So I'll get them to rescue me. And now notice what happens if I do that. If I castigate the other person as the perpetrator, like they're the bad one, and I get somebody to buy into that, then once I do that, I'm saying I'm a victim and I need a rescuer. Well, if we're then ripping that person in gossip, then who now is the victim? And maybe they're not a perpetrator, that original. Maybe they're a person, they might be imperfect. But that's all the stuff that happens when we're passive or passive aggressive. So passive aggressive is, we get even, or maybe we don't help them out as we would another coworker. We don't pick up the phone as fast. We don't help out when we should help out. Hopefully that doesn't happen on urgent, emergent things, but I know situations where it has.
Yeah. And that's scary, right? Like especially in these smaller comm centers, it's me and this other person in the room, and we're a team. And
I'm going to punish you with silence.
I'm
going to punish you with silence, or I'm going to punish you by not jumping in as I should. Okay, now pause for a minute. I'm not saying that, these are terrible people here. No. It's what humans do. South of heaven, there's all kinds of crap we do, right?
Exactly.
So then what? What do we do? If there's conflict with a coworker, we have to decide, are we inclined to be aggressive or passive, too passive or passive aggressive? We've got to own it. If I'm being aggressive, if I were to ask somebody who I really trust, they would be able to say, yeah, you're more intense. You kind of tend to character attack, or you're coming across with messaging that is insulting. Yeah, you can be too aggressive. Okay, own it and be open to the change. If I'm passive, admit that I have anxiety and I'm really wary about confrontation. If I'm passive aggressive, own that too. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense.
Okay.
I think knowing ourselves and how we respond to conflict or, is half the battle of, taking away the conflict in the workplace, right? I
Yeah.
mean, and sometimes we could be, the perpetrator without meaning to be,
That's
you know?
right. That's right. And there's nobody that feel that is more dangerous. And I don't mean to say this too extremely, but some of the folks that are the most toxic are those who, by feeling that they're the victim, are actually more inclined to perpetrate.
Mhm.
Because when I'm justified, if I feel right and self-righteous as the victim, I can end up with a lot of fuel to behave in ways that I'm entitling myself to do that I
Mhm.
really don't have the right to do.
Yeah,
So, and again, this is not bad people. It's just us. It's humans.
exactly.
Okay. So first, step one is, where am I at in terms of the way I relate to people when there's conflict? Am I aggressive, passive aggressive, or passive? Now, what about assertive? The answer is to be assertive under certain conditions. What do I
Mhm.
mean by assertive? All right. Clearly, respectfully convey your concern to the person.
Mm.
Okay. Now notice what I said, Ashley, is you got to be clear in conveying the concern.
Mm.
But if you're the one who's been encroaching and taking over my work and acting like you know it all and you got to correct me, even though you're not my supervisor or my CTO, I could be clear with you, but that doesn't mean I'm assertive. If I say, let me be really frank, you idiot. You're a control freak and you got to knock off this crap, or sooner or later, somebody's going to run you over with a vehicle and it might be me. Okay. Now I'm being clear, but that's aggressive.
Yeah.
I just made up that stuff again. Right? Okay. So it's got to be respectful too.
Yeah.
So, but here's the thing, we can be so respectful that we're vague and we're beating around the bush. They don't even know what we mean because we're not being clear. Respectful is, I really don't want to be upsetting. I really don't want to cause any trouble here, but sometimes I get a little bit frustrated with you and say, what do you, as a dispatcher, wait, cut to the chase. What the hell do you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. So clearly and respectfully convey the concern. Then the issue is this, how do we do that? And one other thing. Is it wise to assert ourselves with this particular person? Sometimes it's not wise. Some people are risky people to confront because you will be punished. There will be paybacks, and it may create even a bigger problem than you have already. That person who is like that is that toxic and that risky for others in the comm center, preferably is in a rehab process to change that, or they're on notice, or they're not there. Having said that, there's still folks in our comm center, hurt people, right? So there may be hurt people who are hurting people, and you got to decide if it's safe to be assertive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think what I'm taking from it is that, you need to find safe spaces and environments to be able to clearly state your concern with that person.
That's right.
And if that person is a risky person, as you described them, possibly leaning on leadership to make them aware of the situation and kind of put the ball in their court to assist you in managing this stressor that's happening in the comm center.
Yes, if this is a really good point you're making. When do we involve a third party or leadership, my upline, in addressing a peer and a conflict you have with a peer? Only when you've done all that you should do to address it and take responsibility yourself. Don't avoid, because this ties together the first piece of what we're talking about, right? And how to handle conflict with a peer. If you're avoiding it, but you want to be rescued, don't expect a good response from your supervisor.
Yeah.
Having said that, if you're choosing not to confront it because it for good reason that you've really thought through, you don't feel the person is a safe person to confront, that it's going to lead to more toxicity, that's going to be bad. Okay, then it's legitimate to go to the supervisor, your upline, and say, I know that I should go to the person, but here's why I'm not. I don't feel safe doing that. Therefore, I need some help. Okay.
Awesome.
Having said that, if we feel that the person does have the potential for responding well to us, Ashley, in that situation, I would say, okay, any message worth conveying, you're going to feel far more confident and you're going to do a far better job with it if you write the message down first. I mean, write the whole thing out. First, just lay it right out there. Don't worry about editing. Don't worry about being offensive. Just get it all out, like venting, right? Put it away for 24 hours. Bring it back, read it again. Of these things that I've said here, which feel like there's still an issue that does need to be addressed? Check this, put a line out the rest of it. Okay, put it away another 24 hours. Unless this is hot and you got to deal with something right now. That's another thing. Now I come back and say, okay, of the things I've kept that are important to say, what is the way in which I can most clearly, respectfully convey that concern? You follow? How do I communicate this clearly and respectfully? Write that out. Okay. Now that that's written out, I'm ready to go to the person. Although I would suggest what's called a softening start. And that is you assure them of good intent. Hey, I want you to know, I want to talk with you, not to tear you down or not to make things worse for us, but to help improve our teamwork together. Can we take a minute and then choose the right place? It's not only how you do it, which is by improving your messaging with the strategy I just gave you. It's the where and the when, as you said.
Yeah.
Now we got to choose the where and the when.
For sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just it in a nutshell. Then we have to take every case on a case by case basis.
Of course. And I'm gonna hit you with another one in regards to toxicity in our comm centers. What are some tools to deal with what is classified as toxic leadership when the people on the ground aren't feeling supported, or maybe they feel like there's some favoritism going on, or consequences aren't equal? The list can go on, but where they're not feeling that with support from their upper line management.
Yeah. So much of this depends on what we've already tried to do to address the problem, right? Again, if a principle is, I have to take personal responsibility for doing my best to relate to this situation. So what does that mean? Number one, I have to evaluate I might feel there's been favoritism. There's been unfair practice by the leadership, but does that mean that they're entirely untrustworthy to go and speak with privately? And we're inclined to say, yes, I'm not going to do it. Remember, that's because we're conflict avoidant typically. No, wait a minute. Because if I just jump to, I don't have to because, they're just completely untrustworthy. There are cases in which that may be true. So I respect that. But there are also plenty of other situations where we're just afraid of going. And part of being a professional and growing and maturing as a professional is being able to clearly, respectfully convey my concern one-on-one directly to the person I'm upset with. We got to stop the end around stuff in an unhealthy way, engaging, triangulating people rescued from a perceived perpetrator. Because, the people you want to agree may agree with you. That doesn't make it more true. It simply means they agree.
True.
Okay. So my first thing would be, how do we know, Ashley, that the person are they entirely untrustworthy because they've been practicing in ways that are unfair as a leader?
Yeah.
Right?
I don't think you know until you talk to the person, right? Because I think a lot of things that we do, we just do and we're unaware of the impact it's having on folks, right?
Yep. Yeah. And here's what's tough is because I've had, over these last 17 years, we're going on 18 years working with 911. I've had plenty of people say to me, privately and in small groups where there's been, we swear our lives to confidentiality. In our training, the deal is you don't share anything that is shared in the room of a personal nature unless you have explicit verbal permission by that person in this class to share that thing, whether Marshall shares it or Ashley or anybody else in the room. And they swear by that. And I've come back to comm centers like, we couldn't believe it, but actually everybody kept their oath. Having said that, the point is, I've had now pros tell me, no. In our center, there's retaliation. If you confront the leader and they know it's you and you go to them, you're going to end up punished. You're going to be losing opportunity for advancement. They're going to, et cetera, et cetera. I think that is highly unusual. I know that it happens, but I think to your listeners, what I'd say is be sure you have really strong, viable reason to not trust a leader before you avoid them, before you choose not to go to them. Otherwise, I think it's important to go to a leader, especially when they've given clear indications that they want to hear from their people. Having said that, if we've gone to a leader, because your question is, what do you do if a leader is toxic and like it's really impacting quality of life, like you're the employee? What do you do? Okay. Having said that, if you've made what are wise attempts at asserting, expressing the concern, and it feels like it didn't work and or it made it worse, that's when I would sit with an employee assistance program professional. So in other words, your EAP is there to help you sort out difficult work situations, and hopefully they're qualified. So a licensed mental health professional who is capable of looking at how do you handle difficult work situations, including with your upline, right? To say, okay, here's the situation. I'm not sure what to do. And at that point, it's possible that the EAP could help mediate a conversation. If we need to get a conversation where somebody assists us who's trained in mediating, then we could pursue that. We could bring somebody else with us who's also trusted by the boss or by that leader to mediate. But we need, really preferably, they need to be somebody who's trained to mediate that conversation. So,
and what I'm hearing is that we, as folks who are in it, whatever it is, whether it's a negative relationship with a coworker, a trainer, supervisor, we have to first initially look at ourselves and how we are influencing the problem as well.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, and I mean, I'm this person as well. I'm human. I think sometimes we can forget about our role in the conflict, right?
Yeah.
Even if you think of your personal relationships, when your significant other's upset at you for XYZ, and you're just sitting there like, I don't know why they're upset. Like, it's not even a big deal. And it's, they're just blowing this out of proportion. And in reality, we have some ownership to take in whatever the response is to whatever the little thing is, air quotes, little thing is, right? So when we're looking at, toxicity in the workplace with our supervisor, with our coworkers, you are right to say the first thing is to look at ourselves through the lens of the other person who we might not necessarily agree with, but like, what am I putting off? What am I doing? And what can I change?
Yeah, that's right.
And it's not always an easy answer, right? But there are sometimes things that we're doing that are giving that person fuel as well.
Yeah, that's right. And look, unpredictably, I'm going to say something here that I say unpredictable because you might not think it flows from what we just discussed, but I think you're making a huge point here, Ashley. And that is we've got to practice self-compassion and kindness for ourselves. I don't mean in terms of a hall pass, avoid responsibility. I mean it in the opposite. And that is what those who research self-compassion will be really clear. It's not narcissism, and it's not about me needing more entitlement and me being right and everybody else. It's kind of like hall passes. No. It's the opposite. When we are really hard on ourselves, when we're super critical with ourselves, we don't tend to grow as much psychologically, and we don't tend to be as healthy mentally. When we are able to, if we have some respect, you said, I'm human. Okay. That's the start of change. Well, now that sounds silly, but here's what I mean. If I can say, I know I'm human, so I probably have a part in this, but I have the right to learn and grow too. I shouldn't expect perfection of myself. That means I'm open to learning what my part is without it meaning I'm a bad person or that I should be condemned for it or now I have to, I'm defeated. No. If your mind's, look, I work, working with couples for so many years. How many times I had couples in my office, it might be two physicians, a nurse and a physician, a firefighter and his teacher, wife or husband or whatever, all that. And same-sex couples, it's not about that, but they're all humans. And here's what, here's the thing. Both of them were trying to convince the other person that the problem was theirs. They're just convincing. It's like, and I would have to go, hold up. You can do this at home for free, the blame game. But I'm charging you a fair amount per hour. Don't you want to figure out something else to do with this? Oh yeah, that's why we're here. and here's what it comes down to. Even if you think you're only 8% of the problem with your coworker or the boss, you got to own 100% of your 8%. And if you really want to get a better reception from the other human, try going in with a very explicit humility. And what I mean by that is this. You know what I realize? I want to talk with you. I'm frustrated about where we're at, working together right now, but I'm not here to attack you. I do want your help figuring out how we can make things better. But I can tell you, here's what I think my part is.
Mm.
I've realized that I jump too quick and I don't listen quickly enough to what you said to me last time. And so I'm not implementing all of what you've told me to do. Like when we were in the office the last time, you said, just remember this. Well, then I jump because I get too upset and I need to grow in that. So I apologize. That's my part of things. Does that make sense? Well, yeah, thank you. Most people just like attack or blame. So thank you for owning something. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and so here's my concern, my frustration, and I need your help. This is what I'm perceiving with you. It's not, okay, I'll admit something, but you're the bigger problem.
Yeah.
It's like, no. I'm going to go in with ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I work with couples at all the time, is helping them see 100% of their 8%.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where change takes place.
I think that's a great way to look at it, the 100% of the 8%, because, even with, we can have conflict even with our friends, right?
Yeah.
Our coworkers who we do have good relationships with. Talking about this, when it made me think of the story where after college, I worked like 5 years as a social worker, and I was a case.
Oh, you did that too.
I did all the things, but I was a case manager, and I worked with adults with developmental disabilities and managing folks who had needs for up to 24-hour care.
Yeah.
And I ended up hiring one of my old teammates from my JUCO days as a caretaker. And they were having issues coming on time, just little things that as a manager you have to deal with. And I remember we would like role play any like conflicts, things that we would have to address with our employees to help prepare for hard conversations, right?
Yeah.
And I remember like going back and forth with my CEO at the time, and I was just like, this is awkward. Like, this is someone who I have a personal, we grew up hooping together. Like we're friends, So it's really weird that I have to go into this situation and coach them up, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? And so I just remember prepping for that. And my CEO's advice to me at that time was lean on that relationship. Like, don't ignore it.
There you go.
Right? Like, don't ignore the fact that you have this relationship. Yeah. And I went into that meeting and I was like, hey, this is super awkward for me. Like, I know who you are and the amazing work, the great teammate you are, person and friend, etc. But I need you to do XYZ better. Like, how can I help you do XYZ better?
Yeah.
And that person's response was like, I'm sorry I'm even putting you in this position.
Right?
I got a lot of stuff going on. I know I've been messing up with whatever that stuff was. I'm going to do better. And they just let me in on their situation, and we were able to build from that. And I just think when we talk about these conflicts and these relationships, and like, it's okay to lean on our relationships as well.
So you made a great point about leaning on the relationship. And so I was mentioning that the softening start assures the person of good intent. So it's not a phony kind of a manipulative, hey, I'm going to say a nice thing and I'm going to bust your chops. It's like, no, if you don't mean it sincerely, don't do it. But to be able, like you did in that situation, to say, you know what, before I express the concern here, let me be sure that I keep us both in the big picture here. And that is, I value you a lot. And I think overall, we can do this. It'll be great. We need to work on something here. That's a softening start. Does it make them anxious? Like, what are they building up to? Yes, it does. However, they also need to hear some assurance so that they can settle a little bit. Does that make sense?
No, it makes complete sense.
Okay.
And I think another question that we received when I asked folks for questions is that, and it might play into this because it might deal with conflict and things of that nature, is like how to deal with the feeling stuck in our careers, in our comm centers. The person even went on to say, like, my benefits and pay are so high now because I've been in this for X amount of years that I might have all this conflict, I might have all this XYZ, but I just feel stuck, like I can't make any changes,
Yeah.
even though I'm extremely unhappy due to these relationships that I'm having at work.
Let me make sure I heard the last part about the conflicts at work. What I'm hearing is a person may feel stuck right now. One of the reasons you point out was they might feel stuck because, like, how can I leave? At this point, I've accrued so much experience that I actually have good benefits and good money
And seniority, if we're talking
and
about
seniority.
work
I don't want to start over again. So
Mhm.
there are a number of reasons why now pros can feel stuck. Number one is they feel like they can't replicate the pay and the conditions someplace else, or at least the pay and the bennies. Okay. Now the work conditions are really tough in 911. So, if you're looking, so typically it's not like, how can I find, comparable difficult work conditions.
Yeah.
But, okay. So one kind of stuck is because I can't replicate the money, the bennies. Another one is I don't feel like I can do anything else. I've done this so long. I don't know what else I qualify for. I've heard that one.
Yeah.
And then there's, and I don't know quite the best way to put this, but it's about, I'm stuck because I don't have the confidence to do something else. Okay. Now, fourth could be, I'm stuck because I don't feel it anymore. I don't, the mojo's not there. I'm not in love with the work anymore. I'm not into it. I'm phoning it in. I'm just kind of stuck. I'm kind of stuck in the mud here, taking the call or dispatching. Okay. So we'd almost have to deal with each of those, but I think the first thing is know what kind of stuck you are. Is it stuck because it's really about the fact you don't think you can replicate the bennies in the money? Okay. Is it because you don't believe you can do anything else? Is it because you lack confidence in your ability to maybe retool, get more schooling? And let me just suggest this. If we look at the confidence issue there, I think that's a place to start in exploring. Is that in my way of development as a person in the bigger picture in my life of becoming the rest of who I want to be? Sometimes it's not about, I feel stuck because of money. It's, I feel stuck because I don't feel fulfilled as a person, but I don't believe that I'm capable or I'm smart enough. I just don't have the belief in myself as a person, so if you can relate to that, if somebody out there can relate to that no, really, I mean, I got into this job, I know I'm good at 911, but I'm not sure I'm good at anything else. Okay. Now we're not trying to send people away from 911, but we certainly, it's far better to stay because you've done a 360 review and it's the right place for you. And that it's really wise for you. And so if you struggle with low confidence in your life, that you have a hard time believing yourself, that you're super self-critical and that you feel like you're stupid or you're not smart enough and people tell you and it bounces off, you get affirmation from people and you don't really believe them. The imposter syndrome, if that's a way of life for you, I'm not what other people think I am, then I think that is where take advantage of the free employee assistance program and get some free counsel to explore what happened to me such that I lack the confidence. What's gone on such that I don't believe much in myself. And because we can't cookie cutter, a bump up in confidence. There's got to be some realization, some aha, and some strategic work to boost confidence.
Definitely.
I don't know. Is that too heavy?
No, it's we out here lifting, we're good. No,
Right?
I think it's super relevant. And I think a lot of folks are dealing with, like you said, figuring out what stuck they are. Because I think even more so, right? Some days I might love my job. Some days I'm like, yeah, this is what I'm in it for. Like, this is a good day. It feels good. And then some days it's like, I'm unappreciated. I'm overworked. I'm not helping anybody, So I think definitely doing that self evaluation of what is causing that stuck feeling most often and how we can improve in those areas, because some areas are things we can all improve in all the areas really to a certain extent, whether it's doing research to see what other departments are out there for the jobs and benefits wise, looking into private, those types of industries, and then the toxic environment that you're currently working in, doing that self-reflection of what can I own and what can I
Mm.
fix,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
where
Mm,
is my
mm.
where is my role in why I'm feeling stuck?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Maybe you'll
So
change that.
yeah, let me jump on that, and I want to circle something you said and
Mhm,
make a comment about it, and then come another step back.
mhm,
Part of what I heard you say, and tell me if I got it right. I'm
mhm,
checking for understanding, right?
mhm.
Is sometimes we feel stuck in a very toxic squad and it's become chronic now. It's not just a season we're getting through because we don't want to bail from our jobs because it's a bad season.
Yeah.
That's not wise. It's like kind of like selling your stocks when the market's down low. Don't sell when it's
Yeah.
low.
Yeah,
You
just
don't
sit in
buy
it.
high, sell low. I mean, nobody's going to tell you to do that, right? And you don't want to just bail because it's hard right now.
Yeah.
Having said that, there are folks who are living under very toxic, there may be under very toxic conditions, but they have learned in their personal lives that there's no escape from toxic conditions.
Mhm,
Now, I'm going to make a reference to my sister Debbie, the dispatcher,
mhm,
and she's giving me permission to reference this. There
mhm,
was a time in her life when she didn't tell her coworkers that she was in a domestic violence situation.
mhm,
And why didn't she tell them? Well, because they all talk the same way about certain things, right? It's kind of like, oh, rolling your eyes. Why do they stay? Like, what's their problem? And then they go back into it. They get suckered back. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
mhm,
Unless you've been in DV yourself or had advanced training, watch out for the judgment. I know it's frustrating at the console to get the same address from the call from the same address, to have the PPOs, the restraining orders, torched by the same person who sought them. I get it. It's complicated in there, though. We don't know what kind of threats people have lived with. We don't know what they're afraid of happening to them or loved ones,
mhm,
right? And so people stay in unhealthy situations longer often than we wish they would. Now,
mhm.
why would I bring that up, Ashley? I mean, I'm kind of going a mile deep on you here.
I'm with it. I love it.
Well, right. I mean, because here's the deal. We have people who not only struggle with confidence, but struggle feeling that they have even any right to protest wrong.
Mhm,
They have to live with injustice because it's too dangerous to protest it.
mhm,
If somebody's been through violence of some sorts in their life, and it's not always physical violence, it can be powerful mental manipulation
mhm,
by somebody who's into coercive control. Okay.
mhm,
That's a whole other topic. Now they're in the comm center. Now they're living through and they're not protesting conditions that should be changed with a coworker, with a supervisor, with a boss or whatever.
mhm,
And to that person too, I would say, if you can relate to what I'm saying, get to the EAP or to a women's resource center.
mhm.
Okay. Male or female, get to the EAP or women's resources, somebody, and talk about your fear of asserting yourself because you've experienced a threat or the sense that it's not safe to do so.
Mhm, mhm,
So, I don't want anybody to stay stuck because they're afraid it's unsafe to try
mhm.
to change the circumstance.
Yeah, and I think that's a big to kind of tangent a little bit is
Yeah,
that we're all coming into this line of work, as we said, as humans. We all have our own baggage, we all have our
right.
own life experiences. And I
Yeah,
do think sometimes um as dispatchers, we can kind of forget that the person we're sharing this room with is bringing their own life experiences to
yeah.
it. For example, I had a post training where the officer, or I forget which class it was, um, where they had us write like truths on
Mm.
a sheet anonymously and put
Truths.
them in the yeah things, our
Yeah.
life experiences that maybe someone else doesn't know.
Oh, got you.
And they pull it out and it's all anonymous and they'd read it. And they pulled it out. And someone in our class wrote, I watched my dad kill my mom.
Right.
And so as a dispatcher, as a 911 dispatcher, we hear these gruesome calls, these gruesome, the worst of the worst, the things people only watch on TV. We hear them happen
Yeah.
in real life, in real time. And we kind of talk smack about it sometimes, especially
Yeah.
TV stuff. I think that we have a definite we're a little burnt out with DV, and I know our officers and our responders are definitely as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we forget that the other person in the room, we have no idea what their experience is,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what they're
Absolutely.
bringing to their console to be able to relate and help. Um,
Right.
folks who are calling in during crisis. And we should
Yeah.
definitely should be aware of that as well. Because we're definitely sarcastic. We definitely have dark humor. And sometimes we forget about the real life baggage that we're all bringing into our comm centers.
This is a powerful statement, Ashley, that you're making there, and it brings together what we've talked about so far, and we can add to this. Okay, so the first thing is what I'm proposing, what we're establishing so far is, look, if you've got a situation in your comm center that's difficult for you, either assert yourself, or if it's unwise to assert yourself, get the assistance that you need to address the problem, whatever that is. If it's EAP, if it could be HR in some situations. Having said that, then, so we know we're not want to encourage anybody to just default to, oh, I can't, and it's so dangerous that I, this or that, that I just have to kind of take on this victim role. However, there is the reality that some folks don't have their voice. We can rock it with other people. I remember a gal who was an attorney. She was amazingly powerful at taking on the bad guys in court against tough attorneys, convincing the jury. But when it came to her own personal life, she was afraid to assert herself with her husband. She couldn't find her voice. She lost her voice. Isn't that amazing? 911 is the voice. But 911 as a person may have no voice or may struggle with her voice. So what that brings us to is, it's not a hall pass. It's not making excuses for people to not take personal responsibility, to practice what we call the Institute, wondering compassionately. What might be going on? Now, again, we're not making excuses, but for this person, this veteran who seems to be such a asterisk, blue hole, right? They seem to be such this or that. So we can end up really coalescing against that person, even though they've not been abusive. They're just rough, right? But we feel hurt by them. Do we ever wonder compassionately, what's happened to them? How can we be supportive of them? What's going on in their life? What about my coworker who I feel insecure with? Have you ever noticed we tend to judge people that threaten us, that make us feel insecure? If I feel inferior to you, I may need to judge you, to diminish you so that I don't feel as inferior. Wait, let's back up on that. I'm never going to feel elevated by disparaging somebody else. If I'm bothered by them, if this is their pattern, what might they have been through? And how could and maybe I'm not the person, but how could I reach in supportively? Maybe even asking them, are you okay? I know you've been jumping. I feel like you've been jumping my case. I could take that personally, but I'm backing up one step and I really mean it. Are you okay? No BS, man. Are you okay? I don't know. Yeah, no, I do.
I agree. And I think sometimes, we expect the conflict, right? So when we're hurt, we're defensive and this and that.
Right.
And I think for me in my personal life, sometimes I've just told someone like, it feels really mean what you're saying, like just simple language that we used as a kid, like I feel bad when you do that. Like, I think as adults, we kind of go away from the simplicity
you're right.
of conflict. Like, it's like, the root of it is like, you hurt my feelings. And like, that's tough for us to say, to admit, like, we're human and we're vulnerable and we have the ability to get our feelings hurt. It just sometimes hearing that as the person who did the hurting is like super eye-opening. And it's like impact versus intention, of course, but it's like, oh, like I hurt your feelings. Like I feel so bad that I did that. But sometimes we have a hard time just admitting that because it makes us vulnerable.
Well, that's assertiveness. Now look, I hope that there's some veterans listening along with newer people right now, because it might go, oh, you gotta be kidding. Hurt your feelings. How many times have I heard that lately with my new people? I hurt your feelings. Well, I didn't hurt your feelings. You misinterpret what I say. You're too sensitive. And therefore I'm the bad guy. I'm the villain. I'm hurting you.
It's not me, it's you.
Right. So here's what I want to pause. It's like, okay, there's a difference between saying, you hurt my feelings, and when you said that, I felt hurt. And I know it's fundamental and it may be very elementary in a way, but not necessarily, because remember, I mean, in my work, I observe communication hygiene. I observe the potency, the ineffectiveness, the plus side and the downside of every word that comes out of people's mouth that I work with, because I have to help retrain them to connect with each other, to save their marriages or their partnerships, right? Or their relationships with their children. And we're sloppy in the way we say important stuff. So to say, when you said this, you really hurt me. Okay, now what does the person feel? Defensive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like what? I hurt you. It's almost like you're saying I punched you in the heart or punched you in the
Mm-hmm.
face. In which case, you might end up, you're more apt to get the response. You know what? If you just toughen up a little bit, you weren't such a sorry ass whiner, you wouldn't be so, right? Defensiveness, reaction, now it goes nowhere. Hold it.
Mhm.
I might have taken it wrong, but when you said that,
Mhm.
it felt hurtful. Can you help me understand where you were coming from?
Mhm.
Maybe I got it wrong.
Mhm.
Can you help me understand where you're coming from? Oh my gosh, I didn't mean that. We were under fire, like getting calls from every place. Like I was intense. I was stressed out. And then you did that. And so boom, no, that's not what I meant.
Mhm.
Often we can get the reinterpretation by how we invite the
Mm.
person into a convo.
Exactly. So true. So I'm gonna shift a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think this is an important question that I've had come up quite a bit. And
Yeah.
it's someone wrote in and they said it's difficult being a male in this job as a dispatcher. They said you either are looked at as weak or couldn't hack it to be in the field as a law enforcement officer, a firefighter, or a medical provider. How do we tackle this perception of males in the comm center? Because I definitely think historically it has been a air quote woman's role in our field. So males who are out there doing this job who may feel this way, how can we support them?
Yeah. So that's a really cool question because obviously somebody's feeling that, and yet it's not a question. It's not a statement of that is said out loud. I've never heard it said out loud. It had to be introduced to us just now by somebody who we knew they wouldn't blow their cover, right? So it's confidential. That's valuable. Okay, so the trick in answering this question, Ashley, number one is there's no cookie cutter answer for this. What I would love to do is have it where we can't see the dispatcher, but I'm able to interact and have an hour conversation if they wanted it, to learn what else is going on. Because see, the only way you avoid cookie cutters is to take a lot of time and have the preparation, the wherewithal to study first. What are the conditions? And that goes with all kinds of tough problems, right, with people. So the first thing is, okay, am I inclined to need the approval too much of those who don't approve of me, or those who would diss me, or those who would throw me into a weak category, or I'm less than category? Do I have a pattern in my life of needing more approval from the people who I can't influence than I should? So if I need the approval, the acceptance of people who I can't influence, it's a setup for misery. Having said that, all of us have a certain level at which we need approval from other human beings. But do I have those in my life who do love and accept me as I am unconditionally? That doesn't mean they don't challenge me. They love me enough to accept me the way I am, but they also are going to challenge me to grow. Do I have ample acceptance of those I respect in my life to begin with? If overall I feel like I'm not acceptable, is it that others don't accept me, or that I've never fully accepted myself? If the answer is yes, you know what? It's more that I've never really fully accepted myself the way I am, for who I am. Then that's the piece of work I need to do. Otherwise, I'm held hostage. My happiness is held hostage to those who I can't control, but who don't accept me. Now, having said that, then I think we have to consider the source. But see, the cookie cutter solution would be, you know what? If they don't like it, well, screw it. That's their problem. It's not your problem. Move on with your life, because you can't have everybody love you. So next question. But it's not that easy, right? I think we have to look more at what makes the need for their acceptance so great. The other part of this is in a really basic kind of a way, is the more old school people are in the emergency response industry, the more they're going to think that this is woman's work. Now, hold on, think about that for a minute. What is woman's work? I don't know. My physician is a woman. A dispatcher is a woman. A firefighter is a woman. What the heck does that even mean? But the more traditional they are, when my sister became a dispatcher, Ashley, the idea was any chick can answer the phone. Now, if you want to be a firefighter, a fireman, And that's man's work. So the idea was, this is not a job that's too difficult, and it doesn't take a lot of brass. It doesn't take a lot of chutzpah or mental toughness, because you're just answering the phone. To the extent that people carry that mindset, they're the ones you're going to, this member of the 911 family is going to feel mocked by, or belittled by. And I'm going to say, wonder compassionately why that person is still ignorant of such an obvious truth about the power and the strength as a human it takes to do the job of 911 professional. So one way we flip it around from feeling injured by or needing acceptance of is to wonder compassionately, this isn't somebody that I would necessarily even want as my friend because of some of these things they're conveying. And yet I'm bothered by this. What have they been through in their life, or what's going on with them such that they're still ignorant? And so obviously about how non sexually binding the role of the dispatcher is. Gender binding.
Yeah, it's so true. And even in comparison to folks in the field versus, folks under the headset, I mean, the jobs are individual and built with all their own challenges. And, there definitely are officers and folks who are in the field who are like, this is an easy job. And then there's others who are like, I could never.
No, that's right.
Do your job. It's both ways.
That is so true. How many field responders would wet themselves if they have to stay at the console a whole day?
Yeah.
I mean, there's that. One last piece about this, if I can bring it back, is if it's bothersome that they would say that, but there is also a part of this of self-acceptance is saying, do I respect this work? Do I see the value of this? And can I admit to myself that maybe I'm not a fit as a field responder? Maybe I could not do that field work. And it is okay that I couldn't, because maybe that's not who I am. It's not what I'm cut out to do. Ryan Dedman, when you hear his story, he was a cop for a little while, and he realized, I'm 131 pounds soaking wet. I was an All-American. He wouldn't tell you this, but he was an All-American cross country runner. Did you know that? Ryan?
Yeah, I knew he was a runner. I didn't know he was an All-American though.
Yeah, he was All-American runner.
Man, that's
but
wild.
He said, I'm 130, I don't know what his weight was, but he said, I'm not the guy to catch the bad guys. Like, I don't want to be out there chasing guys through the crap and the mud in the backyards. And so he acknowledged, that's not for me. Maybe I can, or maybe I can't, but that's not a job that I think I'm going to be best at. So part of it is accepting what we aren't. No, I'm not a firefighter, and okay.
No, I think that's, especially dealing with the trauma that we deal with in this line of work. It is learning to accept things as they are, right? Things we can change, things we can't change, realities of who we are, the calls that affect us. I think doing that work individually definitely helps offset trauma in our personal lives and our professional lives.
It can.
It definitely plays into, the whole self-care aspect, right?
Well, yeah. And I'm just, one more thing about this, just to take what you just said in terms of the role of trauma, right? And I'm going to put a spin on it just a little bit. If you're a listener and you've struggled with what we would call a kind of a big time negative core cognition, a core thought about yourself that is super negative. As a trauma therapist for many, many years, what I did was I helped people identify what are the core beliefs that pull you down. An example is, I'm not good enough. Okay. I'm not lovable. It was my fault. I don't deserve to be happy. I don't deserve love. You'd be amazed at how predominant those beliefs are, even among our now family members, among humans. Well, if you've struggled with, I'm not good enough. I don't deserve to be loved. I don't deserve to be happy. I'm not a good person. I'm a bad person. I'm a failure. I'm unlovable. I mean, I can spout those so quickly because these are the ones I've heard privately come from the mouths of people who are hurting chronically, who struggle with depression, who struggle partly because of PTSD with these things. And I'm going to say this, typically those beliefs can be healed and they can be resolved and changed. And they often do come from trauma in our backgrounds. When we're children, we tend to blame ourselves for the adult problems that we're impacted by because it gives us a sense of control. If it's me and I'm bad, maybe if I'm good enough, I can change it.
Mm.
It's called the locus of control shift. It becomes a way of coping when we're young, but we end up believing the lie that it was us and we're bad. So we strive our whole lives to overcome because then we'll be good enough. I mean, I know that's deep, but I just want to make sure that we're not cookie cutter. If somebody's struggling with the acceptance of any group in a way that's plaguing their happiness, there's a core belief there that may need healing.
And so, and then to tangent off that, and when we talk about first responders and dealing with our own baggage and our own stuff, what are some resources, tools, etc., for families? And when I say families of first responders, kind of like, how can I, as a dispatcher, help my significant other understand maybe the baggage that I'm bringing home? Because some days I literally tell my partner, I'm like, we're just going to watch TV today. Like, I don't want to hear anything. I'm overloaded. I just need to be able to sit and be with you without taking on any of your stuff or you taking on any of my stuff.
Exactly. I love you, but can we just leave each other alone?
Yeah, right? I love you, but just sit there quiet and let's just cuddle. Like, it's fine. Just, like, how do we help our families understand that side of us and what we're kind of bringing home? And,
Well, Ashley, you don't know you're teeing me up right now. Because I had dispatchers asking me that question for a number of years, beginning around 2005 or 6. And over time they said, no, Marshall, what we're telling you is we need to be trained in how to help our family members. In fact, what they said, because I built marriage retreats and I led couples through marriage retreats. They're very intensive, clinically informed processes. They weren't kind of kumbaya retreats. They're very intense for couples to help heal and grow and change and own responsibility and save their marriages. And that's a lot of what I did. And they said, well, like, we need support because our partners don't understand the way this has changed us. This job has changed us. I said, oh, you mean like your 911 brain that is reset now by hypervigilance, and that if it isn't life or death, it doesn't count, and get to the point immediately, because if you don't get to the point, TikTok time is money. I got another call I got to take.
Yeah, like you feel it in your chest sometimes when they're trying to tell you the story. You're like, come on, where's the...
And they want you to look at them like eye contact. You're used to looking at 5 monitors. If you're not looking at 5, you feel like you're missing something. So don't ask me to look at you. Why does a dispatcher scroll on their phone? Even though they don't like to talk on the phone, they're going to scroll while people are talking to them, because you got to make sure you're always vigilant. That's the 911 brain. So basically, a number of years ago, I think in 2010, gosh, was it that long ago? I created a class called Peak Performance, 911 Peak Performance through Optimized Home Life. And I'm going to unashamedly tell you for a minute about it. Because the premise of that was, what if we could have dispatchers come to a class that's paid for, right, by their comm centers, by the state or whatever. But they get to invite their partners for free. There's no charge for the partners. And they can spend all day together, or all evening if it's 2 to 10 o'clock at night or whatever, talking together about how this work changes us, not always for the bad, for the better as well. In terms of like being super attuned and being able to watch out and help your kids be savvy so they don't end up getting kidnapped and crap like that. But how has the 911 brain changed the way you think, the way you manage emotion, the way you communicate, the way you want to behave with other people? Because the 911 brain changes all that. But the partner doesn't know it. And the class is also open to adult kids or young, kids who are old enough to be a part of this, or sometimes parents. If 911 pros live with their parents, right? But the idea is they're in the room together, so we can unpack these things that we know from, I call it 911 psychology. We teach it to them, and we give them exercises so the partners can talk together about what they're realizing. So when I shut you out, I don't mean to, but here's what's going on in my brain.
Yeah.
When you shut me out, here's what it feels like. When that's going to happen, how can we prevent it? What can we do when it starts? So we get strategic after we realize these things. So there's not a cookie cutter answer. And that's why dispatchers asked me to build a whole class on this. I was in the middle of a family emergency. So I had another one of our clinical faculty do this class in the Detroit suburb about 10 days ago. And it was very strongly received. We had out of the class, all but one of the members of the class was able to bring their spouse or their partner.
Yeah. I think that's such an awesome way of setting up a resource, right? Is like, you're going to come learn it with me instead of me writing down whatever I take from it and trying to bring it back and teach it to you.
Yeah.
Because it's true. I mean, the job really does change us, and we are privy to the evils of the world. I mean, sometimes my partner will walk out of this house with no cell phone, no, just like, I'm just like, what happens if someone tries to kidnap you? Like, the worst things happen outside the door.
Yeah, you probably didn't even lock the house. You didn't leave your keys in your car. What are you?
Yeah, like what is going on? And like we like legit have these like it gives me anxiety because I know, I think the worst things happen in the world, and I just want my people to be safe and have ways of reaching out if they are in crisis and are in distress, and but they have no thought of it. They'll walk out without their phone and be back in an hour, and like it's fine, everything's okay. Like, what's wrong? And I'm just like, this is wild.
Well, and here's the thing. Part of what we talk about is that Ashley, you what's your partner's name?
Claudia.
Claudia, what you need Claudia. Claudia needs you. So the non-emergency response partner and the non-911 partner needs some of the savvy that you can bring if they don't have that from being some kind of exposure to all the ugly, the sorrowful, the sad, and the bizarre in life. Having said that, we need partners who aren't 911 as well, or partners who may be, but help us get perspective back. Because, in a given year of your life, what percentage of your population in your service area actually calls 911? It's probably like less than 5%. But now the 911 brain has took on to every risk possibility as if everybody out there is dangerous. So the cynicism that is part of a survival mechanism. Having said that, the other part of this is the now professional, the resilient now professional, right? That this was a project when Tracy Trask, at that time, her name was Tracy Leorenza, at least that was her pen name. She's on the East Coast now. She was my co-editor on that. One of the things that I believe is important, and we had a lot of help on that book, but one of the reasons I think it's so important is because it can be very powerful to read that book with a partner who's not in 911. Just choose a chapter and read it together and talk about it. Tracy's chapter 1 about her taking a house fire where 6 people died. How did that affect her? But what if her partner doesn't know how to relate to that, doesn't get it, and she's changing in her personality. She's pulling back. So to be able to read what's in the book, it's not just the tough stories and all that, can be very helpful. And I will tell you this. If somebody can't afford it, if they're listeners to this podcast, if they can't afford it, I'll send it to them at no charge. I'm not trying to make money on if somebody can't afford it, we want them to have that resource. That's why it was made.
Yeah.
It's really, really important. And you can include my email address, and I make it info@nowandtraining.net. And they would just say, a book, please, can't afford, but please send. And if they're being legit about it, I mean, I trust 911 to be legit. I don't, even if they weren't, I don't care. I'm still going to send it to them. And their snail mail address. People need more resource than we can give them in a class, give them in a podcast. That's part of why you're doing this. We want them to be equipped without cookie cutter stuff.
Exactly. And, I feel like we could talk for hours and hours and hours, and I love our conversation. But I think the last question that I want to spend some time on is something that we deal with quite often in this line of work. Just the nature of the work is the constant cortisol spikes that occur during our career, during our shifts.
Yeah.
We could take a fire where, 6 people die, then answer a DV. It's an active DV where we're hearing this person be assaulted. And then we answer 911 and they're like, oh, it's not an emergency.
I'm sorry I'm calling. It's not an emergency, but yeah.
It's not an emergency, but so how do we manage that in our careers as dispatchers to keep going, longevity?
So there's a 911, a resilient 911 mindset, okay, and then there's a resilient 911 skill set. So there's a lot to that question. Just to give you one pithy little thing that might seem cookie cutter, Ryan Dedman actually did this at a conference, a state conference. He had somebody come up in front of the class. He asked the class, okay, anybody out there super stressed out in your life right now? And a bunch of hands went up. He goes, okay, I'm looking for somebody who's stressed at least an 8 on a 0 to 10. The lady raises her hand. A bunch of others did. He said, who'd be willing to come up with me? We're going to do an experiment. This person in front of 160 people came up, sat in a chair, and Ryan did the following with her. Okay. And it was quite remarkable. He said, and I'm going to ask you to do this, Ashley, with me right now. A couple things, right? Look, you can reset that psychophys. And Marshall's not about breathing. Boring. Let's stop I'll just get off the podcast, right? No, hold it just a minute. Not all breathing is created equal. First of all, dispatchers, we've done some math on this. Dispatchers are probably missing over 2,000 opportunities to reset their psychophys, reset the cortisol, stop the cortisol production per month. 2,000 opportunities per month. Multiply that times a year and the number of years in dispatch. In a given day, you can reset. It's probably much more than 2,000, probably upwards of 4,000 plus, because there are typically about 200 opportunities during calls that you can reset the psychophys during the calls. Part of the problem with cortisol in 911 is making it a risk for their health and for chronic sleep problems, and it is a major factor in chronic sleep problems, is that they're trying to do something at the end of their day to reset. That's too late. I mean, you still do it. I want you to do it. But you can reset the psychophys with something we call CAD breathing. So here's the question. When can you take a deep breath during a hot call, Ashley? When could you steal a breath during a hot call?
Maybe when they're answering the question that I just asked.
Exactly. When they're answering the question, what are you doing as a dispatcher?
I'm typing.
You're typing into your CAD program, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, what about this? Instead of typically dispatchers hold their breath, they shallow breathe, or they're just not even aware what their breath is doing all shift long, 8, 10, 12 hours. No clue what's going on with breathing.
Yeah.
Okay, now not criticizing that. They were told disregard, just stuff it, keep going, disregard. No, wrong. We lose every opportunity to reset when we do that. Back it up. You're on a call. Doesn't matter what the call is. Every time the caller is talking, hands go to the keyboard. As soon as you see your hands on the keyboard, take a breath. Any breath that's a conscious breath. Take a breath. It doesn't have to be 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. You don't have to say, please hold while I do heart focused breathing. Any breath. It's a CAD breath. We just gave it that name to remember. Hands on keyboard, take a breath. Now, in between calls, there's something called heart focused breathing. We've got data, there's literature on this. And I show people in my class watching their heart rhythm patterns change. If you reset the heart, the psychophys there, it changes the production of hormones, partly regulated by your brain, and shuts off the cortisol. If your heart rhythm patterns are chaotic because you're not doing anything with breathing, then you keep dumping the cortisol. So on the call, CAD breathing. Every time the caller's talking, take a breath, any kind of breath. Sometimes, when they're rattling and you'd like, awesome, they're giving me everything I need to know. I don't even have to ask. Obvious, great. You can take more breaths. Dispatchers are worried about sighing. Like, well, but if I take a deep breath, I'll be sighing. No. The reason dispatchers are inclined to sigh is because they've been holding their breath for so long. When they finally take a breath and they're frustrated, then it sounds like a sigh. Right?
I never thought of that. Yeah. Okay. I can see that.
Right. So here's the deal. CAD breathe. Every time hands go to the keyboard, enter data in CAD, take a breath of any kind. You do that, and if it's a 4-minute call, you might be able to do that 5 times. If you take 100 calls in a day, that's 500 resets. Do the math, multiply it times your week and your month. Now, so here's the thing. I want, as the brother of a dispatcher, for you to be well, Ashley. It's not like we're talking about them out there. It's you and your listeners. And it's not a cookie cutter to do CAD breathing. Now, when you're in between calls at bedtime, I encourage you to do heart focused breathing. So you imagine that your breath is flowing in and out of your heart area. Just try it for 30 seconds here. Imagine your breath is flowing in and out of your heart area, and begin to take some slow, deep breaths, a little slower than usual, in and out of the heart area, maybe about 5 seconds or a little less, if that's more comfortable for you. Now just go ahead while I'm talking, 5 in, 5 out of the heart area, just a couple sets. I'll do the same thing. You can do those between every call.
Mm.
I mean, I know sometimes you can't because you get the next tone come right in, but and do it at bedtime. That's just the tip of the skill set. There's just so much more, right? And we get into this in class, but I hope that's helpful for you.
Oh, it's very helpful. I definitely think the CAD breathing, I think especially when we're in high stress situations, right? It's hard to remember certain tools, certain things because we're elevated as well. Our call is elevated, we're elevated. So simplifying it and that using that terminology, CAD breathing, I think was very helpful for folks who are trying to find small, because the idea isn't that we're doing these huge, big changes all the time. It's small consistencies, right? So if we're just implementing that aspect of it, the CAD breathing, it's going to go a long way to help us in our career.
Absolutely. I would like to even propose as an incentive for people out there. And that is, if you send an email to info@nowintraining.net and say you practice CAD breathing for a full week of your shift, we're going to give you a free registration to one of our courses and we'll send you the book.
Awesome. Very cool.
Okay.
I'll definitely include that in the bio. Yeah.
For a full week, every day, doing the best you can. Okay. And if they don't do it the full week, they do it for one day, we'll still send them a book, because we have to incentivize 911 to do this stuff. Because, and I'll zip my lip then. We create a life that's healthy, one breath at a time, one day, 1 week at a time. Okay. So, and we can do this. 911 has to protect themselves. They can do it. You can do it.
Definitely. All right. So to wrap it up, this question I ask everybody, you've given lots of advice and lots of awesome tools and info. And so I really thank you. I really appreciate it. I've learned so much, as you said. It's kind of a cheat for me because I am a dispatcher. I am the audience, right? So I kind of get the front row seat, and then I can just spout it out to everyone else. What advice would you give someone who is considering a career in dispatch? What is one takeaway, one nugget that you would give them?
You may not like the answer to this question.
Run.
Well, no. I mean, because it's not discouraging. It's not discouraging. It's just this: know yourself. You need to know what you've been through. If you've been through big trauma in your life, address that first. Get significant healing first. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is, as you enter into the field, be committed to finding a mentor. Be committed to finding someone on that team that you can trust, that you can be open with, and that you will take risks to be vulnerable with, to express what's going on in you as you travel through every day, every week of that career. So you don't practice the old emotional code of sucking it up. Your well-being is going to depend on you being connected to other humans who get you. Use peer support.
That's awesome. Jim, thank you so much. I mean, so many great things that we've gone over during our time together. And I just really appreciate you and your willingness to come on and shoot the stuff with me,
You betcha. Thank you for creating the platform, Ashley. And I wish and pray for you to have well-being and a great life beyond 911. I wish that for everybody here. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll be right back with you. Okay.
Okay.
That was a wonderful episode of Let's Talk Dispatch with Jim Marshall. So many great tools, trinkets that he provided that we were able to come up with from questions that you guys submitted. I'm going to include all the links, all the kind of bonuses he offered throughout this episode in the description of the video, so you guys don't miss out on any of those opportunities to connect with Jim, 911 Training Institute, and to check out the book, The Resilient 911 Professional. As always, like, subscribe, tell a friend, and until next time, everybody, stay raspy. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Let's Talk Dispatch. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube at The Raspy Dispatcher, follow us on Instagram, and check out Let's Talk Dispatch anywhere you listen to podcasts. I'll see you next time, and stay raspy.